Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So I hope you've all had a chance to watch the season 4 finale a couple more times since it aired, but since we're heading into the hiatus now, I wanted to start my bonus videos off with just a look at my favorite moments from season 4 as a whole. So a lot of you have been asking for some full-on spoilery videos for season 5, so I'll have an announcement for that after my list, so be sure to stick around. Since this video is all about season 4 moments, hopefully you've had a chance to see the episodes, but just in case, spoiler warning for season 4. So here we go. Number 10, the reforging of ice. I was so happy they decided to use this to open the season. It's so haunting and hypnotic. They even played Rains of Castamere softly in the background while it was happening. I know a lot of you guys flipped out whenever they buried Widow's Wail with Joffrey, but at least we still have Oathkeeper roaming around the Vale with Brienne. I remember after we met Beric and Thoros, people started to talk more and more about resurrection and reanimation, or at least reanimation in terms of the White Walkers and characters coming back. Like secretly, everyone was trying to do the mental math on Ned Stark being able to return and reclaim ice and take revenge on everyone, either as a white or someone with crazy red god magic. But whenever you see ice get melted down, it's like all your hopes get melted down with it. The only way anyone would be able to restore it now would be to dig up Joffrey's corpse and hunt down Brienne. Not that reforging ice would restore House Stark or Winterfell in any way, but it's just one of those secret wishes that in your fandom brain you hope would come to pass, like Ned Stark would return and just take revenge on everyone. My sympathies to book readers too. Let me know if you had that thing where you read about this a long time ago in the books and just forgot about it until you saw it on screen. It's almost like sometimes on the show I feel like I'm learning about things all over again just because it's been so long since I read it in the books. I know a lot of you guys have been reading the books since the show started, which is amazing. I'm so happy this show has people reading more, but book 3 was published in 2000, which is like 14 years ago, so a lot of times I find I have to reread stuff before the season starts, just for context. It also happens whenever new books are published, so when Winds of Winter gets published, I'm probably going to have to reread Dance with Dragons just to remember what happened. On to number 9, shiny new dragons. The dragons in general this year were amazing, as expected. That was one of the biggest effects they were talking about during Season 3, so of course they had to top themselves for Season 4 and make the dragons look that much cooler. If you wondered why we did not see them that much, it's just because they're so expensive to do. Digital effects are really expensive. I'm looking forward to the day when a fully digital creature can be nominated for a Best Performance. The best dragon actor, of course, is Benedict Cumberbatch in Desolation of Smaug. Peter Jackson full-on mocapped his performance, so the dragon was much closer to being a real-life actor. I don't think the dragons on Game of Thrones are mocapped just because they don't speak words, but Drogon was a great actor this season. He was like a big dog or like a tiger that was just domesticated. Like an animal that you could walk up and pet, but dangerous enough that he could shred you by accident if he wanted to play. I feel like two of the biggest dragon questions in the fandom are, one, could Bran ever warg a dragon? And two, what is the particulars of the psychic link that the Targaryens have with the dragons? George R.R. Martin has never given a definitive answer about warging. He's only said there's no precedent. No one in history has ever tried to warg a dragon, or been recorded trying to do it. And he hasn't gotten far enough into the books to explain the minutiae of Targaryen dragon bonding. If you do want to read a book that goes into that a little bit more, you should read The Princess and the Queen. It's a short story that's part of that Dangerous Women anthology. It deals with the dance of the dragons. It's one of the many Targaryen civil wars that happen in history, so if you want to read more about dragons on Game of Thrones, that would be a good place to start. Even though it takes George R. R. Martin a long time to write those sequel novels like Winds of Winter, he does write a lot of bonus content like Dance of the Dragons. On to number 8, The Purple Wedding and Joffrey's death. As amazing as this was, it was no red wedding, and Joffrey's death wasn't even the biggest thing I saw you guys talking about after the episode. It was actually the dwarf jousting. That was like the biggest question I got, that and Penny, just because she had a lot of emotional scenes in the book with Tyrion. I rewatched the episode a couple times and couldn't find any references to Penny, but I do feel like the dwarf jousting completely lived up to expectations. It was ridiculous. I think if you felt excited about it and then immediately shameful for being excited, you were right where George R. R. Martin wanted you to be. There were actually a lot of times in the season where I found myself cheering at really awful stuff on screen, mostly because it's fun to see stuff from the books, and then immediately, you process the moment and think, oh, this is really bad, I'm a terrible person for cheering right now. And then suddenly Joffrey dies and you don't feel ashamed about cheering anymore. It's not something I've mentioned a lot, but one of the things I love most about the show is the way it makes you feel really excited for really terrible things. Things like dwarf jousting, Tyrion murdering people, White Walkers, the list just goes on and on. But number 7, Jaime and Cersei in Baelor's Sept. Over your own son's dead body, how could you? This was an infamous book moment that became much more controversial on the show. At the end of the day, I think what they intended to do with it and what the audience saw were two different things. I was disturbed by what played out on screen, but because I kind of knew what was coming in advance, I wasn't quite as outraged as people who only watch the show. The thing that really stands out to me, aside from the actual act of the sex, is the way Jaime reacts when people call him out as the father of Cersei's children. The only time I've ever seen him acknowledge it in an obvious way is when Tyrion called him out right after he was thrown in prison after Joffrey died. Whenever Cersei called it out as being like, our baby boy is dead, it seemed like Jaime just kind of mentally let it pass right through his brain. Almost like he was mentally blocking the thought, as he was later in the finale whenever Cersei said she told Tywin what they'd been doing. I don't think Jaime wants to deny that Cersei's children are his. I definitely think he understands it. I think he's more of like a change the conversation kind of person. Like he's like, let's not confirm or deny, let's just talk about something else. I'm interested to see if season 5 does any fatherly Tommen and Jaime scenes. They only really started giving a lot of scenes to Tommen after Joffrey died this season, so it'll be interesting to see what the show decides to do. On to number 6, Dario takes the champion of Meereen. Pissing in the dust notwithstanding, this was a pretty meta scene. The really obvious homage I saw was the Raiders of the Ark takedown, but the biggest Easter egg was something that I didn't learn about till much later. The champion of Meereen is basically shouting Monty Python insults whenever he rides out of the gates. It was this really elaborate joke that D.B. Weiss thought of. He's a huge Monty Python fan, so he had the champion shout the Frenchman's insults from Holy Grail. But because they're really strict about diegetic speech, the person who created the Valyrian language translated the insults into Low Valyrian so that it could be authentic to George R.R. Martin's world. Whenever Miss Sandai translated it, she translated it as something different, so you would have only known about the Monty Python insults if you spoke Low Valyrian. And if you can do that, you are amazing and deserve a high five, because that's just awesome. Number 5, Sir Pounce makes a rare appearance. As much as the show changes things from the books, I always get really excited whenever they include things like Sir Pounce. He's a big part of Tommen's character, and as much as I disagree with them aging him up so much, adding Sir Pounce back in was icing on the cake. This was also in that same episode where they gave us Lands of Always Winter, so I felt like the episode in general was a big hat tip to book readers. From what Michelle McLaren, the director of the episode, said, we're not going to see Sir Pounce again, but that doesn't mean that he won't be referenced. Because they chose to include Sir Pounce with Tommen's scenes this season, I'm hoping that means that when we get Shireen next season, we get to see Patchface, just because he is important to her character. And Dan and Dave have a pretty okay track record with including little things from the books whenever it's important for characters' backstories. Number 4, The Lands of Always Winter. This was another one of those minor controversies just because some book readers felt like it was spoilers for Winds of Winter, and there was the whole thing about the HBO website spoiling The Night's King. Regardless of what you thought about it, or whether or not you thought the Night's King thing was spoilery, I was just amazed that they even tried to do it. Based on what Dan and Dave said about it after the fact, they said that they were just trying to show something that was going on in the book story at that moment, but wasn't something that George R.R. Martin chose to include in the books. So another example of that would be like if the show decided to show us Stannis getting his army and sailing to the wall. They didn't do that, but it was happening in the books. It was going on, but you don't read about it in excruciating detail. Tycho Nestoris is just like, here's a giant bag of money. Grab everyone and get your ass to the wall. You better pay this back. Because they said they'd be doing additive scenes like this even more in season 5, I think one of my bonus videos is going to be for like little things in the books that we hope we see on the show. Like things that George R. R. Martin didn't write about, but things that were happening. With regards to the White Walkers, I feel like they're just massing their forces and slowly moving towards the wall. So hopefully in season 5 we'll see another epic shot of their army. I know a lot of you are hoping to see some giant White Walkers, but I don't think that's going to happen, although I do think that they could reanimate one of their corpses. Number 3, the Battle of Craster's Keep. Another big change from the books, but something that was necessary to tie up old plot lines. I love the death they gave to Burn Gorman. I was such a fan of his on Torchwood that seeing him play a crazy villain was so much fun. There were a few big questions about the way the story played out there, like, why didn't Bran just war Hodor earlier and make him hook out on everyone? I wasn't a huge fan of the Locke character either, but they had to resolve his story somehow, and Craster seemed like a good enough time as any. Too bad they couldn't have postponed his death to the wildling attack. It would have been fun to see him get killed by that huge arrow the giant fired, or accidentally kill him with that big scythe. Or maybe they could have sent him into the tunnel with Gren the Giant Slayer. May he rest in peace. On to more battles. Number 2, Oberyn Martell versus the Mountain. This was one of the big book scenes that they remained pretty faithful to. They did alter Oberyn just a little bit. In the book, he was just a little bit happier whenever he was dying, just knowing that he had poisoned the mountain. but the important parts were taken right off the page, like his speech trying to goad the confession out of him. I saw a behind the scenes video with Pedro Pascal learning the fight choreography, so I think he did most of the fight himself, which is amazing. Fight scenes are hard to do, period, but fighting with weapons like they did in that scene is almost impossible, especially if you're not an expert. So it was like the best fight scene of the season and one of the best filmed fight scenes. Like, I really enjoyed Brienne versus the Hound, but I felt like the way they filmed that was just a little too much shaky cam, so it took me a little out of it. And finally, my number one moment from season 4 is actually a tie between Arya going to Braavos and Tyrion killing Shae and Tywin. Arya heading to Braavos is such a huge turning point, though, for her character, and it's the start of her story in book 4, like a whole new book's worth of content. I think that's part of the reason they chose that to be the final scene. I maintained the Fire and Ice theme of the ending each season just on the basis that she's a Stark of Winterfell. It was such a huge point of departure for her story, and it's a huge transition for the show. Stannis is at the Wall and taking White Walkers seriously. Tyrion gives the middle finger to everyone in King's Landing and hits the road. It's like characters on the show transitioning from high school to college, or university if you're international. Tyrion's ending felt like it should have been more cathartic, but I think he's going to find that killing Shae and Tywin isn't going to lessen like any of his emotional burdens. The relief of those revenge kills is always really short-lived. It's never a 100% solution to all your problems, even though it feels really good at the time. I don't know from personal experience, I'm just extrapolating from what the characters are doing on screen. Tywin's final moments were interesting for a number of reasons. There's that big debate about whether or not he was being truthful when he said he never intended to let Tyrion die. I chose to believe him the first time I watched the episode. He definitely holds back a lot of information, but I don't think I've ever seen him outright lie to someone, at least to their face. He did admit that he quietly took every opportunity to let Tyrion die over the years, so he kind of contradicts himself. I think it just means that you can take him either way. You would be equally right in saying Tywin was going to execute Tyrion, or he was going to save him. It's like Schrodinger's toilet, until he takes that dump, both choices are valid. Since there are like a billion other huge moments, let me know what your favorites were. And if you want to talk about spoilery things that you want them to include from the books next season, please just use the spoiler tags in the comments. So here's my big explanation on doing full-on spoilery videos and stuff for the books, because I know a lot of you guys have been asking for that stuff. I want to make content that you guys ask for, so if the majority of you ask for something specific, I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen. The reason I don't do spoilers all the time is because making 2 videos for one thing is just way too much. I already feel like during the season when I'm doing more Game of Thrones than normal, I'm not able to do as many other videos for other things as I like, so adding another video on top of that is just a little too much. Because the season is over now and we're into season 5 stuff, what I'm going to try and do is just designate portions of my videos for spoilers. In addition, I will be doing exclusive book videos, like videos for just stuff that's inside the books. Like whenever we're just talking about prophecies or theories like Patchface, Varys with Blackfire, as well as the 3 Heads of the Dragon, stuff like that. Like that's just book stuff. And because you guys have been so awesome this season, my next video is going to be a book video. It's going to be about Aegon the Conqueror. I'll post that on Sunday. Be sure to subscribe to get it. I'm really proud of the way you guys have completely embraced the use of spoiler tags in the comments. Because you guys have largely been really good about the way you comment, it hasn't been a problem here. Thank you so much for embracing that. You have no idea how much of a problem it was whenever I was doing videos for season 3. I will say you can make any comment you want about anything on any of my videos as long as you're not committing a hate crime or trolling someone. The only reason I make videos is just to communicate with people, just to talk about something that we both really love, so the more you guys comment, the happier I am. I'm going to be doing a special personal Q&A during VidCon, so if you want to start asking me personal questions for that, feel free. I'll try to answer way more than the usual 10 or 20 in the video, and a lot of them I'll just answer in the comment section. I'm doing a separate VidCon video in a couple days that'll explain all that better, but right now, click here for my Season 5 predictions, and click here for my finale Q&A. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys tonight. High fives.